Rev up your engines! Now here we have a 2003 Honda S2000. Probably the penultimate sports car Honda ever sold to the public. And this one has an interesting story. The owner bought this car for $15,000 with 16,000 miles on it. But interesting enough, he did it in 2015. In this case, the owner was very smart. He was way before the curve. You couldn't touch this thing for anywhere near that. Not even twice it probably, for the shape this thing is in. These things are becoming real collector's items, and he did it before they became true collector's items. And you can see, he doesn't drive it much. He just took it out of the garage. Obviously, it's age and it doesn't have that many miles on it. He picked the right time to buy. Now, these cars were built basically around the engine. Their big fame is they were the most powerful naturally aspirated piston engine per liter. Now, you might say, okay, this thing only has 247 horsepower, but it's only got a 2-liter engine, 123.5 horsepower per liter. And nobody else was getting that much power without a turbo, without a supercharger. As you can see, it's a naturally aspirated engine. There's no tricks to these things other than fantastic engineering. And there it is, the infamous double overhead cam, 2-liter VTEC Honda engine. You see, there's no turbochargers, there's no superchargers. Just a piston gasoline engine that was probably one of the best designs ever made. This is a true driver's car. Unlike most of Honda's cars, it's rear-wheel drive. It's not front-wheel drive. It's a classic roadster. So you might say, okay, Scott, if it was such a great car, how come they only made them for 10 years and stopped making them? Well, guess what? There aren't that many classic drivers out there left anymore. Begin with, 96% of Americans don't even drive a standard. They drive automatics. So that leaves 4% of the population as your market. And unfortunately, in the end, when they finally stopped making these, there was the economic crunch, the gas crunch, and the sales just got so low that Honda just decided, we're not going to make them anymore. It was purely a money-making decision. Let's face it, Honda makes more internal combustion engines than any company in the world. They really know what they're doing. And they certainly did when they built this. But it's also a giant corporation that wants to make a profit. They sell a lot of Civics, a lot of Accords. They sell all kinds of cars. And if they have one that isn't a big seller, it doesn't make any sense to them to keep producing something that isn't making them a lot of money. And people might say, oh, you know, the Mazda Miatas are cute little sports cars, and they sold over 1 million of them. Don't compare a Mazda Miata to this thing. If you know how to drive cars, you get in a Miata and say, okay, that's a fun little toy. You get in this thing, and it's an insane little sports car for serious drivers. You want to get a cheap little sports car? Get a Miata. A lot of people say they're girly cars, but I mean, hey, beauty's in the eye of the beholder. They are not performance cars like this thing. This is a serious performance driving car. Now look at Toyota, they brought the Supra back. Or did they? It has nothing to do with Toyota Supras. It's a BMW sports car made in Germany by BMW. It has nothing to do with Toyota. They didn't build the things. This was designed and built by Honda, something that they wanted to be proud of, and they did what they wanted to do with it, and then decided, hey, well, there's not enough people buying them, so not so much for that idea. Now, if you could find an original one like this, with such a small amount of mileage on it, for such a low price, or basically even twice what he paid for it, and you want one of these, you better snap it up fast before the price gets even higher. Because I guarantee you, they're never going to make them again, and you're never going to find such a vehicle that can last so long. This one hardly has any mileage on it. I've seen it with a couple 100,000, and they were still screamers with the original engines, if taken care of. They built this thing to go fast. That's what it was designed for, and that's what it did. And the main thing is, unlike things like Ferraris, Porsches, they don't fall apart after a little while. They keep going. You can abuse these things. They're just like Honda motorcycles. And I'd say to people, go rev the engine up, listen to it, and they'd rim, rim. I said, no, rim, rim. Then take it out on a quarter-mile drag strip. They can take it. They're made for abuse. They want to be abused. As long as you change the oil and don't overheat them, they will last and keep ticking down the road. Listen to this thing. This is the heart of this car. Smooth, 4-cylinder. The engine's quiet, but it makes a decent sound. Now, the owner has kept it stock. That's what he wants. He doesn't want to have the police come every time he goes screaming down the street. A lot of guys will straight pipe these things. They're loud as can be. That's not what he wants. If you want to do that, go right ahead. The engine can take it. Old school. No backup camera on this baby. Well, now we're going to see what this thing can do with its 123.5 horsepower. And here we go. That's what this car is about. Pure speed and a little sportster. And if you really know about these things, yes, he had the retainer work done on this thing because it's the early model. It's not the 2200, it's the 2000 cc. And he had it done in New York by an expert who then he said scared the pants off of them when they were taking corners on 2 wheels, spinning all over the place. And he said, you know, you might get new tires for this thing. Now, it's a marvelous 2-seater. Yes, it's a 2-seater. They didn't even bother with back seats because they were smart. Why put a back seat when the only thing you can fit in there is a bag of groceries? They were serious about building a 2-seater. 2-seaters in the United States have never been all that popular. And it was a whole bunch of market things that the price of gas went up, the economy went down, sports cars weren't selling, then Honda decided they're not going to make these things anymore. And if you just look at the car, inside it's just a plain looking car, right? You don't buy this car for what it looks like, even though it's beautiful on the outside. You buy it for how it drives. As you can see on the tachometer, the red doesn't start until you get to 9,000 RPMs. And that's serious, 9,000 RPMs. It's not a joke. These engines were built to take. Now, you know, I like my Celica. I really liked it when a guy brought the GT4 over here, all-wheel drive turbo. It was nothing compared to how this thing accelerates. You can't compare them either. This is a rear-wheel drive roadster, more horsepower per liter. It's just a load of fun for a serious car driver. It's a limited market, but they don't make them anymore. The ones that are left in good shape, they're getting to be like hen's teeth, scarce as can be. The prices are really going up now if you're thinking about getting one. My advice is sooner than later, or you're not going to be able to find a good deal. You'll be priced out of the market, or you'll just pay way too much for the vehicle because it'll just keep going up, and there aren't any more being made, and I can guarantee you they're never going to make any more. Today, with internal combustion engines, you have stricter and stricter emissions. In a couple of days, a guy's bringing me an RX-8. They were fun cars to drive around with their rotary engines, completely different type of vehicle. They stopped making them. And they stopped making them mainly because in Europe, they couldn't pass the latest emissions that they came up at the end of the RX-8 run. They just said, we can't get it to pass European emissions. If we can only sell them in the United States or somewhere, it's not worth a bother. So they stopped making them. It had nothing to do with they didn't run right. It's that they just can't meet strict emissions because they're gasoline. Well, electrics don't have to meet any kind of emissions. That'll be the future of insane sports cars for sure as time goes on because they're always a limited market and they're generally toys. This doesn't have very many miles. He hides it in the garage. If you had an electric car, so what if it can only go 200 miles and then had to be recharged? You're probably not driving it to 200 miles, so it doesn't really matter. You just want pure speed. And this thing, hey, it was pure speed in its day for a really affordable price back in the day. And if you're really into engine technology and engine history, this is a car that you'd love to own because not only is it fascinating in terms of its technology, it holds up over time. It is a Honda engine, the #1 manufacturer of combustion engines in the world. They knew what they were doing when they built this thing. Because more than anything else, this was basically made as a showcase for Honda. They wanted to have a zippy little sports car. You don't have to throw a turbocharger, don't have to put a supercharger on it. They got a lot of fun and a lot of horsepower, and they knew by not putting all that added crap on, the engines could really hold up over time, as this one had, as most of the ones that I've seen have. Unless they're extremely abused and over-revved, these engines just keep going and going. And at the same time, you have this beast that if you drive it conservatively, he thinks he gets about 24, 25 miles a gallon in the thing. You put it in top gear and you're only going 55 miles an hour, it's totally doable. With this kind of speed, that's really good gas mileage. Because the Mustang that I had with the 667 horsepower, I got about 3 miles a gallon in that thing. That certainly was faster than this, but at what price? Anyways, the Mustang was cheated. It had a big old supercharger on it. If you put a supercharger on this thing, it probably would have gone faster than that. So now you know a little bit more about the Honda S2000s. Why they're an interesting piece of history that keeps on ticking and is so much fun to drive without breaking the bank. Although, if you do try to collect them now, it probably will break your bank because the prices keep going up and up. I saw a guy the other day paid $70,000 for one, and it had a lot more mileage than this thing had on it. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.